Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 17th, 2024 meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. All votes will be conducted via roll call vote. Attendees via Zoom must use their real name for accurate minutes. The chair will recognize participants when you speak. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. I'm going to begin the roll call of who we have in the room. Senate Durgis.
Here.
Good morning. George Butterworth.
Here.
Hi, Rita Carr.
Here.
Abby Doanita.
Here.
Great. And we have Holly Backus with us.
Present.
And online, we've got Tom Montgomery.
Here.
Thanks for joining. And we have a couple of guests. Mike Burns. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Sam Phelan. Thank you for joining. Let's start off with public comment. Is there any comment from the public? That would be either Mike or Sam. Okay. Well, let's begin with the staff update then. Holly?
Thank you. So a couple of weeks ago, I think it was maybe even a month ago, I forwarded on to the CLG, both commissions, some webinars, as well as an offer from the CLG, from the MHC, to utilize CLG funding for the National Alliance Preservation Commission's forum that they do every 2 years. I attended one virtually during COVID. It was in Washington State. And their next one is coming up in Florida, in the end of July, beginning of August. And the CLG has additional funding, you know, that's money that's allocated through Congress for certified local governments, and Massachusetts had some more funding and they wanted to basically offer it to CLGs to go to that conference. So myself and a colleague in the office submitted an application and we were accepted for full scholarship to go. So I'm so
Congratulations.
excited. Yay.
So you get to go to Florida in July?
Yeah,
That's what I was saying.
it's okay. I lived in South Carolina for 10 years, so I'm good. I'm okay. AC is your friend, but no, I'm really excited. I think there's going to be a great program that they put together. If you haven't taken a look at the link of all the different things, myself, Nikki, sheriff, land use specialist who does HTC inspection, we do a lot more in the office learning about preservation and architecture. Both her and I are not only taking the normal conference, everything they offer, but we're doing walking tours. There are also a lot of education components, classes beforehand. So I'm really excited. I've already done a lot of networking with some folks in Florida in the preservation world. So yeah, it'll be a fun.
Where's it gonna be held?
West-
What city?
West Palm Beach.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff about,
Yeah, Flagler College. So I don't know if you all know that one of their preservation professors from Flagler College has been in Nantucket for when we did our Keeping History of Our Water conference. And so her name's Leslie. I'll hopefully be able to see her, a couple other folks within the University of Florida. I believe they're going to have representatives there. And I've also been connected to a couple other folks. So very excited about the opportunity, and we'll probably be able to update the commission on how that experience was. Yeah. Oh, we're excited. So I just wanted to let the commission know that this CLG has been offered through staff to go. So, very excited.
Great. That's great.
maybe you can present to us when you get back.
Yeah, probably be doing that.
We have continued discussion regarding Pleasant Street and Williams Lane improvements. Mike or Sam, do you want to let us know what the latest is?
As far as an update, one, I appreciate the commission having their discussion last month. I believe the way it was left was that the commission was going to provide feedback to others about the elements of the corridor that were contributing to the character and that needed to be preserved in order to preserve the character of the corridor and contributed to the historic integrity. I think once we had those elements kind of refined, we could then provide a new alternative or develop a new alternative that we could share again with the commission to ultimately get a letter of support. So I think I heard that the tree canopy was rather important at the last meeting, and that was to be preserved. If there was any other features that the commission had strong feelings about, I mean, that was kind of the intent, was to kind of flush that out so that we can make sure that the next alternative included all of those elements so that we could have consensus built, and that we would, as Sam mentioned, derive to the design that was developed within a context-sensitive manner, and did preserve the what was important to the community and contribute to historic integrity and not detract from any of that. Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I would ask if that's like a shared consensus that we should be anticipating. Is this some kind of communication of the different elements that were important to you all, so that we can provide that to our design engineers and other committees, so that they might review those and concur, and then we can actually start developing this this other alternative.
I believe, and anyone can speak up, that that what was important was the narrowness of the corridor and the tree canopy. And I believe that most of us were in agreement that preferably it would remain two-way, and we would explore, because we're not losing the lane, explore some sort of path that would go onto the Phelan's property on the other side of the trees to keep the canopy. But I've since learned from Rita, and please speak up if you like, that that she wasn't as dead set on maintaining two-way traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just one person. I feel like, sorry, and I'm sorry I had to miss the last part of the discussion last month. I know there was talk of potentially doing like a pilot of one-way traffic, and so I'm just wanted to say I'm open to that in terms of if that would allow for keeping the existing trees. I just think it's the least disturbance to the existing fabric of the roadway itself and the trees that are there. And so I just wanted to say I personally think that that's a worthy thing to try and pilot, and if that could just be an option. So
I think that's a good suggestion, is to explore something that does get rid of one of the lanes to provide for a multi-purpose lane, which wouldn't intrude on the Phelan's property. But other commissioners, do any?
George wasn't here. I don't want to put him on the spot.
Yeah, but I did watch the discussion afterwards, and I think making that one way would pretty much be a disaster to traffic flow. And I think starting in September with the pilot it would take months to see the effect there. I don't think it'll go well in September, but I think it'll go really poorly as we get into the high season. And I thought the idea of keeping it 2 lanes, a narrow pedestrian only sidewalk on the far side of the trees, with as little, keeping the width down so we're not taking any more land than we absolutely have to from the Phelans after they have been kind enough to not develop the hell out of their property there and have preserved that. But I don't see it as a bike path behind the trees. I think the bikes are still going to be on the road, but there's no bike path leading into it. There's no bike path leading out of it. I don't see how having a bike path in that little teeny area would help much. And there is a sidewalk, is once you get the back street on the other side, once you get by that little open area, there is a sidewalk all the way to Five Corners and all the way up Pleasant Street. So I think, having a continuous sidewalk, I've walked it a couple of times and you're dodging cars. And then the split rail fence only makes it worse because you can't jump out of the roadway because of the split rail fence. But I think having one lane, I think would work really poorly now and worse into the future as traffic picks up.
All valid points. Thanks, George. Anyone else?
I
Oh,
think,
Tom, sorry.
I concur with everything that George just said.
Abby?
yeah, I was going to say, I think George brought up our concerns with it, but the two-way versus one-way. And, I think at the last meeting, what we talked about was maybe creating an outline for a letter once we were all together. So I think that was the thought of what we were gonna do at this meeting, was create that outline. So then we could then go to the other powers that be and go with them. But I do think a lot of the discussion with the back and forth of, if we did the one-way, it would be disastrous for traffic, especially because even if we pilot it, it all depends on when we pilot. And if we pilot it in the summer and it's like a traffic disaster, you know, that would obviously be a huge problem. So I think that was some of the concern with the one-way versus two-way, because there's only so many ways to get into town. And if we remove one of them during the busiest season, then it's just gonna cause more congestion. And I think, George, you also brought up some good points of the concerns of the cyclists of, you know, if they're on the sidewalk, then it's unsafe for both them and the pedestrians, and then it's causing more congestion as well, because cyclists don't really use that way today because it's not the best way to get in town. So I think that was another concern of, like, if we try to accommodate everybody on the path, but it's not a complete pathway into town, then you're just gonna have more confusion with the cyclists and the pedestrians, and just kind of making it harder for everyone.
I also, Mr. Chair, recall a lot of our discussion about materials to be used and try to make it feel as rural as possible, with the narrowest of bike path and pedestrian. I know if you're trying to accommodate both of them, you feel you have to be at a certain width, but trying to limit the width, use no plastic rail guards or anything that is not in keeping with our history. So try to go with grass berms and or Belgian blocks, and make signage as small as possible. I can't envision a one-way street, and I can't envision which way would be better, to go into town one way or out of town one way, because it's heavily trafficked, and I think two-way is going to be the only logical way, but I am not a traffic expert.
Yes, the other thing I thought you brought up last time, which is a good point, was in addition to the limiting of the materials and the signage, was also not having really bright, like, paint and all of that. When we were talking about the street and the asphalt and things like that, making sure that it's not super bright, because again, preserving the more historic.
And I think we'll have to have those bumps again, you know, with the intersections, and because it's the William Street as well, which is pretty narrow. There's some big trees along William Street, so.
It's to the Phelan's credit that what they have not done there that has made that place remain as remote and rural as it is.
Exactly. Sam, is there anything you'd like to add? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm encouraged to hear the committee or the commission saying the same things about historical preservation that the family believes applies on Pleasant Street. You know, since the last meeting, I've thought about it a lot, and the narrowness of the road is really the primary feature. You know, all of the other things about the curbs and whatnot are all important, but it's the narrowness of the road that's the primary feature. That's one thing. So thank you very much for agreeing with the family on that. It's my understanding that what is being proposed here is a trial of a one-way. And I hear a lot of negative comments about that. One way is not possible. I go, so don't make it a month-long trial. Try it for a week. What happens? In other words, make it a minimal thing to see whether or not all of the concerns are real. I mean, we're talking about, I think there's Warren Street, I think goes off of Pleasant Street, and Back Street, I think also goes off, but also comes into Pleasant Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's two ways back.
And what other roads are we talking about that get affected by this? So I think there's some minimal disasters here. And as one who has sat on our back steps and looked at the traffic on Pleasant Street during the summertime, it's primarily going into town.
Yeah.
That's the real, that's the area that gets really backed up. And if you were to go one way going into town, that's not going to affect that traffic. I think we'd still have backups and whatnot, and I don't think the other traffic, Mike could know better than I do. You need to see how important that is. So those are the comments I got. Keep it narrow. I like all of the other comments you're making about maintaining historic, and I would just give the one-way a shot. If we get to a point here where you do feel that a walkway is necessary, the field probably won't be a problem. The recently created meadow between 61 and 65 Pleasant Street is not going to be a problem. I think the biggest issue is privacy for my brother at 61 Pleasant Street. And if you bring a walkway on the other side of those trees to maintain your tree canopy and whatnot, he's got some privacy issues.
Thank you for that, Sam. So are you saying that at this point, he would probably not be amenable to giving an easement to the town for a?
No, I am not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Thank you for your comments.
Can I add just one more? I mean, this is going back to the very beginning. I think obviously Mike and the powers that be on transportation feel a need for this. I know a lot of times we have to share the road with bikers. And I know that creates danger problems but it would slow everybody down, the traffic, if you had to share the road. I sort of don't see the demand for a bike path to the Stop and Shop. It must have more meaning than just that. Because you're not gonna go down there and stock up for even your 1 week rental and take your bike. So I don't know. I think there are a lot of ingress and egress to the town that we might have to look at and determine. Because I know you've done it on Washington Street as to how to get in and out on a bike, and this is just another one of those issues, which I'm glad you're addressing, but I don't bike, so I don't feel the need for this, but that's a personal problem. I know that Abby runs, so she does. So
Yeah, I have my ways. I do think, and I'll let, Mike, I'll defer to you. I think that one of the concerns was that the current paths into town have been kind of more and more inundated with cyclists, and we want to encourage people to use less cars in general, which is why they want to explore alternative ways for people to get downtown that are bike, pedestrian, whatever friendly, just so that everyone isn't necessarily on the same way. But I think, to your point, we kind of have to weigh it both. I mean, ideally, yeah, no one would use a car and would go, wow, that would be great. but I don't think we're at that place yet.
Just raising people up.
I'm trying to think what is parallel with that, sort of in line with it, and that new, relatively new path that goes on the other side of the marsh over
Yeah.
by Cumberland Farms. The old railroad bed is about that same section, you know, in line with this area, and it seems like it's, to George's point about there being biking paths before and after that section, that's where it's really facilitated, whereas there really isn't a bike path through town
Yeah,
anywhere.
no, I know, and I agree, I think that's part of the challenge. Like, I know the land bank, they're working to do some of the connecting with some of the stuff on Washington Street, and they're still connecting it, but to your point, I mean, if you look off island, a lot of places where they actually end up putting bike passes, what you brought up, old railroad. You know, it's an easy way, cause it's like the path's already cleared, so a lot of places, that is where they put a lot of, you know, shared use bike paths, walking paths, are old railways, cause it's a.
But a lot of the old railroad got built up. Hatch's liquor store is right on.
Exactly. Unfortunately for us, we can't necessarily do that,
Yeah.
but that is a good point, that is usually how people did it, because it's easy.
Yeah. The worst part is getting around Marine Home Center, and particularly the sweet little old house that's right next to Marine Home Center on the town side. I can see why they wouldn't want to give up their little bit of lawn there, but they are currently a peninsula sticking into Orange Street.
Yeah.
I suddenly had to walk my dog through there the other day. It was like, oh my God, you have to jump out into the street to get around the telephone pole. The sidewalk is this wide. And it would involve taking their yard and then somehow wiping out some of the parking at Marine Home Center if you really had a bike path go across Marine Home Center. Other than that, when you get to the old Island Home and, you know, that route ultimately could be really, you've got land bank land, eventually we're gonna have Otison's, all of that. And it is a little hard with the thing going around the lily pond, which is, not the lily pond, the duck pond, whatever that is, Consu Springs, that a lot of people do, it's a little off your route and a lot of people don't know to go there. And it's a little nebulous when you're coming from town to know to go out past sales to get onto it. They need a little more signage or something. For people who don't know their way around, I don't know how many of them end up using that little railroad causeway through the marsh, because it's not that obvious.
I can tell you
This
when-
is a good segue to go back to what Sam was saying a little earlier about 61. Sam's house is the farmhouse. It's way in the back. His brother owns 61, which is practically on the street.
Yeah.
And to George's point, you're going to, if they ever connect the existing sidewalk, which we talked about at the last meeting, and go behind the trees with whatever size walk or sidewalk or whatever path it does exist, you're going to have to go across the garden kind of a place there where they cleared all the ivy and they put in trees now. But to keep that going, because of the porch that's in front of 61, which is very narrow between there and the street, you're either going to have to stop it there and go out on the road, or do something else. And I think that's what the Phalens are concerned about as far as 61 is concerned. And you know, I think that's important to consider for all the reasons George was just talking about down on Orange Street.
Yeah, just to make sure we got our addresses correct. 65 is the one that's very close to the street and has the white picket fence in front of it. 61 is the one that is set back into the field, and that belongs to
Sorry,
my
I got them mixed up.
Yeah, I got it.
I used to caretake both of them, but it was a long time ago.
I know, I've lived there for 75 years.
Yeah. So we'll go with yours.
61 is the one who's owned by my brother, and it's set back from the field. And I did have a conversation with him, and he certainly likes the trees. He recognizes that they're old. he knows that he understands the need for pedestrian access. We all do. All of us who live on Pleasant Street understand that. His concern is privacy to his house. If you put a walkway on the house side of those trees, you know, and all I'm saying is that issue would need to be addressed. I mean, he's even gone so far as to speculate, well, you know, you could take down the trees and then put the walkway up there, and plant some new trees, and 50 years from now, we'd have another tree-lined street. So the privacy issue is up there. As far as 65 goes, you know, Mike and the head of the DPW and I went down there and looked at it. There's issues with Elise Berry's house, which is the next one down.
Yeah.
And it's a very narrow sidewalk there, and they've got to figure that out as to how they're going to tear down all of her bushes and get right up on her front porch also. And, you know, there's an issue down there that's got to be dealt with.
Right.
We don't use that front porch. A lot of traffic out front.
That's Peter Howell's old house, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ollie?
I'm cognizant of the fact that, at the last meeting, we had mentioned that we're gonna have a draft letter, so I'm curious on if we could come to some kind of consensus. So that way, we can provide Mike a letter, he can take that to his boards, to go through that process. I am curious on the fact that the Phelan's, and thank you, Sam, for continuing being with us with this. Because obviously your input is extremely important in your families. I'm curious on one, I guess maybe through you to Mike, on, would the traffic flow be going into town if there was a pilot for a one-way? And would there be a opportunity, maybe our recommendation would be to test it, to kind of see it, because we don't know, even if we're so strongly about, you know, retaining the two-way character, how it's been, you know, historically. Maybe, you know, just looking at seeing how the pilot would work, and I'm curious on what those specifics are, if you guys have addressed that yet, Mike.
When we did the site visit with Sam, Drew and I kind of discussed kind of what the parameters of a pilot, and a lot of this is very contingent on, and brace yourself, there's going to be more sewer work this next off season. Just prepare yourself. It's not because of the project. The sewer work is going to disrupt traffic. So we don't know exactly when that's going to open up, but in my mind, that would be the prime, and in Drew's mind as well, that would be the prime time to do a test. If the sewer work was completed in, I don't know, January, it was probably a horrible time to do the test. We should probably wait till like the springtime. Maybe it's worth extending a pilot period from that point where the work is done in the winter, run it through the spring till, I don't know, I'm spitballing, daffodil. And then by that time, we'll have a very good idea of whether this is working, it's being used or not. And then do the correction. So before the traffic intensifies, you know, like it's doing right now. But I don't know when that sewer work is going to be complete. I think if we had clarity on that, we'd have more clarity on when a pilot could happen. If the sewer work is finished in the spring, perhaps we could do exactly what Sam is suggesting. It's like, let's just open it up for a week, one lane of traffic, market the heck out of this pilot project, get people to just at least try it out, and just see if this works. And if it's not working, then we go back. I mean, it's going to be like a lowest cost test or a pilot. When we were on our site visit, we did actually see somebody with a bag of groceries walking down the middle of the street. The street was closed down. They were doing sewer work in that area. So it was very conducive just to walk in the travel lane. And there was a lady with a sack of groceries. You know, there are people that live in the area that can, you know, it's convenient to just to walk around those areas and take advantage if there's a facility that's there, it's safe and convenient. So I think there probably could be some demand. I think a test could be, you know, a very simple, low impactful way of making this decision for us. If it's all right, maybe we don't make a final decision, but it seems to me that there, from at least some members of your commission, there may be an appetite to at least try this out. If the commission wanted to align a recommendation with what the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee had suggested, pilot it. If it's not viable, then proceed with the two-way option. That said, if there's an appetite to do that, great. That said, we still would like to have these other elements, these other features kind of in writing that we can share around, to where if it's two-way or one-way or three ways, we at least know what's so important. I'm hearing that Sam and his family think that the privacy of 61 Pleasant needs to be preserved. I don't really, I have in my mind a good way to do that other than say split rail fencing between the path and the house. Would that be sufficient, or is there something else, vegetation wise, whatever? I could probably tell you, Sam, that, just tell us what you want and we'll do it.
And I
So
think what we're saying is when we get there, we'll start thinking very, very seriously about that.
but it's good that there's like an openness to at least considering this. So it does seem like there's all the options are still on the table. It seems to me, I think we all need clarity on when the sewer work is done, so we can at least put that to bed, whether we can test it or not, and whether this works as a one-way or not. That said, the other element of materials and whatnot, if that could be just codified in a brief letter, I think that would be extremely valuable, and we can share that with all the different committees and with our engineering consultants, so we can start incorporating that into the design work.
Thanks for that, Mike. Yeah, Holly, you're reminding me that we were waiting for there to be a larger group of us to sort of put together a consensus. And I'm sorry Mickey isn't here, but I feel like what we're saying is something that he would agree with. Unfortunately, he was sick today, so he wasn't able to join, but just to get a consensus among the commissioners, does it make sense? Yes, George.
Well, I just had a couple of comments, which is, one is, if you do a short-term test, all a short-term test can really tell you is if it's a disaster. It can't tell you it's a success. If you do a short-term test of a one-way and a slow season, I don't see how you can say, well, that works. If it's tolerable in the slow season, you'd have to extend it into the really busy season to see how it works. But the other thing I want to say is, if I were the Phalens, boy, I wouldn't want to be punished for the fact that I've kept that property open all these years. And if they would prefer to have the trees cut down, as much as I hate to see the trees lost, so that the sidewalk were along the street and then a new row of trees were put in behind there, if that makes the Phalens feel better, and I would certainly, how they feel about it is really important to me, because they're the ones who gave us this opportunity to have this rural spot that could have had a lot of houses on it, and houses that could have been built so close to the road that we couldn't be talking about putting the sidewalk further into their property. If they had built close to the road, like they're allowed to be within like 5 feet of the road. So as much as I like the trees, I would be open to having a sidewalk right along the street and putting new trees behind it to try to recreate what's there, which, is a compromise.
The only thing with that, and it seemed like there was consensus among all of us, is the narrowness of the road, as well as a preference from the Phalens to keep it narrower. And if it really is a multi-use path with a bike path, it's going to be 10, 12 feet.
Oh, I don't picture the sidewalk being multi-use. I think I picture the car still
for
having
like a 5 foot.
for 5 feet, for just like because when you go further up the street, the sidewalk is narrow. The
Well,
sidewalk,
they're narrow everywhere.
Right.
They're 3 feet and then there's a pole in the middle.
right, and you go up further where Rabimbus's store used to be. Anybody who can remember Rabimbus's, I mean, it's, that building is right to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk is narrow. So I just want a place for people to walk. I don't see bikes being on that successfully, or if they are, they're walking the bike or deferring to pedestrians. So you have to stop if a pedestrian comes along because you're on the sidewalk. But I picture, a narrow sidewalk there and trees put in behind there. So that the property looks as much like it used to look as possible,
Mm.
as the trees have a chance to really come in there. And the Phelan's lose as little property as possible.
That's a long-range plan,
Yeah,
because the trees won't look like.
They won't.
Like it is for another 30 years. or
they
so.
won't, but it's just, and there are some trees that are already missing there as I look at it. They're not a continuous road. There is a chunk that are out there, but yeah, it's choosing between hard alternatives here.
Abby,
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think the tree, we can work with the arborist and figure out like what the best option. I do agree with George's sentiment though, that like, if the family, like that ends up being their preference, considering their generosity of even letting us come up with an option, I think we should kind of defer to what they think works best, but it sounds like based on, Sam, thank you for coming in your comments, like based on the fact that they're engaged, like we can come to some sort of compromise, like I think they can figure it out, to your point. It might not be the same trees as today, but I think that they could work closely, like we have a lot of very talented landscapers on this island, so I think that they can figure something out that will be best for everyone, so I'm not as concerned about that. I do think, though, you brought up a good point about also, Sam and his family has been supportive of us at least testing the trial, so we should also be open to that, in that if they're supportive of the trial, we should do it. I agree with you that we should make sure we pick the right time, so that we're not testing it in January and being like, oh, it's great, and then it's not, but I think if the family is supportive of us at least attempting or testing it, then we should at least be respectful of that as well.
Tom,
Yeah, the reason I'm against making it one way is I view Pleasant Street as a major crosstown thoroughfare. And I don't think it's there's rumblings about also making Gardner Street one way, and I don't think that's part of the Pleasant Street crosstown thoroughfare. Now you have to know your way around for sure to get to Gardner Street from Pleasant Street, but those of us that do, if it becomes one way, that to me just it's going to cause a lot more trouble than if it was two-way, even though it's narrow, all the rest of it, the trees, the sidewalk, the ruralness, all of that, to me is secondary to the fact that that is a major thoroughfare from getting from one end of this town to the other in both directions.
thanks, Tom. So just to be able to offer Mike something to be able to share with others. It sounds like we really have three plans. One is two-way with a narrow sidewalk beside it, which would probably involve the removal of the existing trees and add another, row of trees to. It would be wider than the existing road now, but it would be resembling it. Option two would be to keep the narrow road, keep the trees, and have a narrow footpath that goes behind the trees as discreetly as possible and as close to the road as possible. And then option three is to have it be one way and to have the multi-use lane in the outgoing lane from town. Does that sound?
Yeah.
I guess with your last one, with a pilot.
With a pilot, and the separation, what designates that, that separation is, I think, the details are important. Because I don't think barriers, would work. And we don't want, high contrast colors. but we do want cars to stay in their lane so that bikers and pedestrians are safe. So, I think that that's where the creativity would come in of how do we make this look as natural as possible, keep the character, but designate that separate lane in a one lane option, with the multi-use. Does that sound?
Sounds very good to me. Obviously.
But those are three completely different things,
Yeah.
and I just said, man, I just can't believe they're seriously talking about one way on that street. I think it would make Atlantic Avenue a disaster. I mean, everyone coming in from Surfside is already going to Atlantic Avenue, then everybody coming out of Stop and Shop is, they're either gonna have to get all the way over to Union, or they're gonna have to get all the way up to Atlantic Avenue. I just think, whoa. That's
Well,
that's an
yeah, it would
important
either,
route.
it would either be Atlantic going out, or it would be Orange going out, where you pop down on Dover and then go down on,
Yeah.
on Orange Street.
And the Dover people, their lives are already miserable from
It's a
traffic.
thoroughfare.
They just,
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was helping somebody with a project there, and you have to step out of the street every 2 seconds if you're working on something by the road there, because the cars are just boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, and the street is.
And the sewer work has obviously spoken to that kind of a thing already. Those little side streets were all clogged from top to bottom while that sewer work was going, and it would be the same thing if they were one way either way. That's at least the way I feel about it.
so does that sound good?
yeah, I mean, I think we agree one way is challenging, but I do think at least if we all think it's not going to work, if we try it and it doesn't work, then we have the data that backs it up.
How are they gonna
Because-
determine it didn't work? And to me, to show that it didn't work, that it show that it does work, you'd have to continue for a really long time, so that you're not just doing a short period of time when when the island is relatively quiet, not that we're ever really quiet anymore, but.
Right, but I mean, I just think it's hard to say we won't even consider it without, because that's just the tough thing. If you don't even consider doing a pilot, then you leave yourself open to saying, well, we never even tried that, because the good thing is if we try it, and I agree, I think, and I would look to Mike and his team to figure out like, what does success or failure look like? What are the metrics we're going to use? But I think that and maybe to your point, what is the metric? Is it more traffic? Is it longer traffic? Is it more accidents? Is it, who knows? But I think that there is a way you can measure the relative success or not, but I do think that if you don't try it, then you remove the doubt of that option, where if you try it and you show it doesn't work, then at least you can prove your hypothesis that it doesn't. I'm hesitant to say.
I'm
well, we
open to
can't
going
even
for showing a
consider it.
failure, but I just.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I try to picture what happens to Sparks Avenue, and is it Williams Street? Is that the one that goes up beside the outdoor power equipment? That's already such a mess trying to get your way to Atlantic Avenue.
Holly?
Mr. To address George's point, I would refer to Mike. Mike
Yeah.
is our transportation
Right.
manager. There are certain metrics as a transportation manager that he can, give you on, so I give it back to you, Mike.
Oh,
Well, but maybe before you respond, Mike, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I totally agree with Abby. I think because from my perspective, I think trying the one way has the least impact on the historic feeling of the road. It would potentially keep, the travel lane the same width it is now, keep those trees that have been there and the fence. So I just think it's worth trying.
And not
And seeing.
intrude on the property.
Mhm,
it's the least-
exactly. So
least invasive of the options.
yes.
But what that.
So from
one
that
way looks
historic
like.
perspective, I think we should definitely,
And
Give
the
it a
one
try.
way can't simply just be an unused asphalt lane. I mean, is that how the trial would go? How do you see that going, Mike?
Well, yeah, that was exactly what I was kind of respond to the metrics is, we do have these intersection counting cameras that, that are up on masts that with a fisheye lens that, can process, it just basically, it takes video you run it through a computer system software and it tells you what the counts are. It tells you what the vehicle classifications can be with reasonable accuracy. It tells you the pedestrian turning movements, the bicycle movements. And that's what we would set up at either end of this corridor, as well as a couple of other intersections to kind of see what the activity is like in that general area. And then look at the data. If there's 0 bicyclists or like 1 or 2 a day and 1 or 2 pedestrians, I think that kind of makes the decision for us is that this isn't really a high demand corridor. And even though we kind of promoted this and wanted people to use it just to get a sense of it, it really wasn't well utilized. So I think that would help make the decision for us. And then perhaps only a sidewalk is really all that's needed for the area. If we see that it's actually pretty good used and like during if this is the trial that happens during school year, what does it look like during arrival and dismissal of the school year? Are students using this corridor? Are people that live in the area, are they using this corridor? And even though they have some inconveniences with driving their vehicles, they find it a little bit more of a quaint corridor because they can walk and bike and it's a little bit more quieter or whatever the other reasons are. So I think there's a lot of benefit to just seeing if it works or not. And I appreciate the sentiment that, if the Phelan family is open to kind of having this discussion, that we would be open to the discussion as well to kind of pilot this. And again, I kind of look at what the harm would be. And if it's just a week, 2 or 3 of a piloting, that seems like a low bar or not a lot of pain to kind of do this evaluation. I mean, we're dealing with it now. I mean, there's lots of sewer work going on right now, and it's a week before Memorial Day weekend, and on Washington Street they're pouring concrete, closed down a lane of traffic on Washington Street going into town. So these are pressures you're feeling right now, and it's tolerable. I don't know if it's any bad things are happening because of that. It's just inconvenient. But I think that would be healthy to kind of just evaluate it. Regarding the sentiment of the narrow corridor, if it's all right, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at from the intersection of Back Street, looking down towards Williams Lane, and see the canopy there of the trees on either side of the road. And I'm just curious what it would look like if the trees were pushed back, say 20, 25 feet into the property, and if there would actually still be that aesthetic. And I don't know if I'm confident in that, but I'd lean it to others if that would be acceptable and tolerable. But I'm hearing that the canopy was really important, and I would just pause and say, like, I'm not sure moving the tree line 25 feet into the property is going to keep that character. So I don't know if that helps guide your decision on your comments on the letter, but I just that would be something that gives me pause, and it's like you're going to lose what you think is important to you.
Exactly.
I
George,
wasn't
and then
picturing
I'll-
the trees going back 20, 25 feet. I was
You were
picturing the
thinking
trees going
5
back like
feet.
10 feet.
Yeah.
You're allowing 5 feet for the sidewalk and a little space on either side of that. But the other thing is the traffic study. If we were doing this in an experiment, I would be interested in measuring the volume on all the streets that are affected by this before we close it, and then see what happens afterwards. See how much the traffic picks up on William Street, what happens to getting through that corner to get down to Union Street or Washington, which is your choices there, and what happens on Atlantic Avenue. So we'd be looking at the effect, what the cascade effect is on all the surrounding streets, which are going to take the flow of cars when this is changed there. Oh, and I guess I'm looking the wrong way on that because it's not Union, because I guess it would be Orange, because we're talking about how you get out of town.
Yeah.
How you get out of town will be the rub if we do this.
I do think that's a good point that Mike, I would defer to you guys, but I think that George does make a good point. We have to set a proper baseline prior and then after to measure against it, which I'd imagine Mike is already part of the process, but I do think that is a very good point that and to your point, let's make sure we're setting the right baseline of how we're measuring it from the start. So that, again, we're not doing the baseline in January and saying, okay, this is normal, like choosing the right baseline is important.
Yeah, I mentioned the counting system that we're using for different intersections. We are putting a few of them up in early June as part of another traffic study, and just because we a lot of the data that we have is kind of stale. So we'll have enough now, enough data collected this early summer to where I think we can help inform a good baseline. And then at the end of the day, what's going to pass the smell test is if people are actually using that lane or not. I mean, if it's just like you said, like a 10-foot lane of asphalt that nobody ever is using most of the day, then that kind of makes the decision for you. I mean, a lot of anecdotal information is going to go into the decision-making process. I always say that I just jump on a side here and get on a soapbox. We hear a lot of data-driven decisions. Data-driven is like really like I'm more of a fan of data-informed. That we have to have the human element as part of this. Yes, it's good to have some good traffic data. Let's have the level of service and the volumes, but also there's the smell test. Like, does this feel right? And I think you had to put them both together, and I think that'll help the process out a lot more. So it's going to be a little bit of hard data and a little bit of just anecdotal. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. Would we do a survey, like a way to engage the public to get feedback that isn't, to your point, just database, but also, you know, comments and things like that, like, you know, because we could field feedback from, you know, people, and I'm sure the bike safety commission, I don't know the official name, but like they might get feedback, but we might want to do something official as well, like have a survey or something so that people can also just put their comments, thoughts, and things that isn't as measurable, like they might say something, as George might know, like, hey, normally it takes me 15 minutes to get here, it took me 35, like, which you might not see on the data, but if we hear from people making those comments, that might be helpful
Are you
too.
talking about having a survey during the pilot or after the pilot?
I would say after, to get feedback from people of like, you know, did you use it? Did you not? What are the reasons? Like to feel out, like just to get that context as well, not just like, hey, we saw 25 cars or whatever, but because I think that would also help if some of what George is getting at, like what if someone might normally go that way, but they avoid that way, so they go a different way. They wouldn't be caught on the cameras, if you will, but I'd still want to hear from that person of like, well, I took a different way to go downtown because I knew that this is now one way, so normally my trip that was 30 minutes takes an hour, like something like that, you know?
What happens on Atlantic, so if you're looking particularly, what happens to Atlantic Avenue, what happens to Orange Street as the new exclusive exits from town going south, basically.
Mike, may I ask you another question? And I, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mike, I may have lost this, but the pilot for the one-way would only really be for Williams and that stretch of Pleasant from the Phelan or the end of Williams to Five Corners, correct? Am I wrong on that?
There was a discussion of piling the corridor from the roundabout up to Five Corners. Frankly, I'm not sure if that's popular, I guess, or is it acceptable of an option. But the decision hasn't been made yet. This isn't like a full strategy that we know exactly what the game plan is just yet. I would say just pilot this one section, just see how that tolerates. If nothing else, there's the Cumberland Farms there at the end of Washington Street. I think that would be extremely impactful to circulation, and I don't know we want to muddy this evaluation by making it very difficult to leave from Cumberland Farms on Orange Street, exiting up to Pleasant. I think you'd still like to facilitate that left-hand turn on Pleasant, and so they can use Williams or Pleasant to get out of town. Making it more complicated, I think that would complicate it, but I could be wrong with that, and maybe it's a healthy thing. Let's just make the entire corridor one way, like it was envisioned in the Mid-Island area plan. Let's have the one-way system in front of the Stop and Shop there, with the angled parking on one side of the street, parking on the other side of the street, and have more of a main street kind of corridor through that section, and just, you know, test both sections of Pleasant Street to see if this is actually a healthy system for both ends of Pleasant Street. Do we want the one way in front of the Stop and Shop to create the Mid-Island area plan vision, and do we want the one way on this corridor to preserve the historic character? And is that acceptable, and are those tolerable conditions for the community from a traffic standpoint? And are people actually walking and biking through those corridors and using those facilities? And then we can step back and say, listen, one way worked on this section, but not this section. It worked on both sections, or it didn't work at all.
And thank you, Mike. I kind of think
trying to target just this area, in my mind, would be better for a pilot than incorporating all the rotaries. I think to George's point, again, we're not the transportation people, you are, and, so I don't wanna step on, you know, the process just from our characters and what we're talking about in front of the Fallon's property, and that retaining that section of Pleasant that's such a rural feeling. I think in order for us to, I think everybody to come up with a consensus on what makes sense, back to what Angus had mentioned with the kind of the 3 ideas for recommendation, you know, to look at regarding the pilot. I think this commission may want to lean towards a pilot focused on your corridor area, not taking in those other areas, even though from a study perspective and transportation perspective, you're probably gonna have to look at that, but for a pilot to see how it would work in this area, I think that's where we would wanna, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I
think that would be-
Yeah, I think going by Stop and Shop one way opens up a whole nother big can of worms.
Yeah, and well, and then you're impacting, the banks, the pharmacy, Island Kitchen, the new sushi shop, like, I think there would be a lot of businesses affected by that.
Taxi drivers, that's all I have in my head, is
Yeah.
taxi driving experience for 5 years, and I'm like, how?
Yeah.
I just don't know.
But I also think Holly brings a good point. It's like what we're really truly trying to measure, like, let's be focused on that and not necessarily the larger part.
Well, we're also trying to focus on the historic part.
Right,
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think that's important, again, that's the purview of this commission, focus on this area. And back to that, I think it would be beneficial for Mike, and his group, and because, you know, of course, he goes before the NPC, he's got the, what do you call it, BPAC, I can remember the acronym. I think it's important for this commission to provide that feedback in writing, and to, Angus, you laid out those 3 kind of aspects. I think it would be important for this commission to vote on having a letter written of that nature to give to Mike.
So does the rest of the commission agree? 3 options, and do we want to get into any details about any of the options as far as materials, or like if it is a one-way and a multi-use, how that's treated in material? What separates that? Is it just the use changes on top of asphalt? And what separates it, or is it something different than that? Is there like a, you know, a Belgian separation? Is there a grass median? Is there something that's separating that multi-use path from the one-way?
I think, Clement, last time you had mentioned that if we had to have a separation, we preferred it to be grass. Is that correct? Which is what they do, obviously on Milestone, where you have more space, but I think in terms of being the least invasive.
And that's what we have along Atlantic, not, is it Atlantic? Not Atlantic, Sparks.
And last meeting, you all mentioned to avoid modern materials, asphalt, paint, curbing, and use grass, shells, sand, small road signs on wooden posts. So maybe just incorporate some of those comments that were made before.
Okay.
And I want to say somebody made a comment about split rail fence of some sort, because that is a rural character.
Yep.
So.
And I feel like those are all sort of general things that would apply to, you know, any one of those 3 options essentially.
Yeah,
So maybe
right.
that could be sort of one section together with just our general concerns, what we sort of consensus feel like are the important aspects that we're looking to preserve along this stretch.
Sam?
Yeah, and I
had his
think
hand
that's
up. He wants to make a comment.
You're exactly what I was going to comment. I think the most important input that this committee can give to Mike and the town board, or whatever you call it, town board eventually, is what you consider to be important historic features within this area.
Yeah.
That regardless of what option is picked, Mike would be charged with trying to preserve.
Yeah.
And that's what we're concerned about.
I think that's a good point. So I think when we say the pilot, we should just say it's in the context of the historic preservation. So
Mhm.
whatever's chosen that is affecting that, so that our scope is really focusing on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And we're all agreed about the rotary to Williams is that there really isn't a historic character there as far as we're concerned to preserve, or to comment on that we're really more focused on Williams to Five Corners.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that is obviously still within the National Historic Landmark being the entire island, so I do think, we don't wanna say like, we don't care about that at all, because I don't think
Right.
that's true, but, I think in terms of this discussion right now, it's that Williams to Five Corners is.
Yeah, I think if we put in the context of saying we're looking to preserve the historic character of that road, the area where we're focusing
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
Because to your point, we
That's-
don't want to promote more development anywhere.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it would be fantastic to keep that character that we see in front of the Phelan's all the way to the rotary. I mean, that would be amazing to have street and sidewalk and tree canopy.
Yeah.
And I mean, to think about the whole, everybody in the core area, the town side, Five Corners, to think about them all being able to get onto a pedestrian path and go to the grocery and back. I mean, think of how many cars would go off the road, hopefully, but, anyway, so,
There's
Mike,
gotta be
would it be
correction.
helpful for us to offer any comments about that other section? Between Williams and the Rotary?
I thought the comment of extending the canopy was interesting. You do go by it past the I don't know what the machine with the lawnmowers and stuff are. I can't remember what that's called. Outdoor power, and then past the Boys and Girls Club. It'd be interesting to see how the Boys and Girls Club, that whole section, what that would look like if that actually had nice treescapes on the south side of Pleasant Street. And just, that really wasn't on the radar, but if that's something that has some potential, perhaps we can talk about it. I don't know if it would impact the fields at all, but it's something to at least put on the radar to see that, this is an aesthetic we potentially like to extend. Once we get down to the Stop and Shop area, it's if you have thoughts on that, I wouldn't want to put roadblocks on any type of your comments. If you have some value you want to add for the other section of Pleasant Street, please. I think it can only help the discussion if nothing else. But Mr. Chair, I think I would like clarity on the three options. I don't know if I got exactly how that broke, the details of each of the three options. I don't think I was very clear on all three.
Well, so we'll write a letter, sort of spelling that out, but basically, two options would include the existing trees where they are. And one option would be if it's 2 lanes and a sidewalk, that because it's so tight, the trees would have to come down and they would move a minimal amount to facilitate their growth, but still give room for a sidewalk that's comparable to the two ends of where the sidewalk, what sandwiches that sidewalk. So, not a 6 or 8 foot sidewalk, but one that's more 3-4 feet that is similar to all the other sidewalks, at least on either side of this. Does that,
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm confused. We've talked about so much here today. Are you going to ask us for a vote, an aye or a nay on these three options? Are we separating them? Or what are we actually talking about here? Are we just going to send a letter? The kind of carte blanche.
Kind of wide open.
so let's put the motion on the table that we provide 3 options. And it sounds like they all have the same aesthetics, except one of them moves the trees for one of the options. Would anyone like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. So the motion is to write the letter with the 3 options and include the context that we talked about of this project of the historic preservation in general, and if there is a pilot, again, that we're supporting in from historic preservation. So that would be the motion. I obviously have many notes, as does Holly. So I would think that whenever the letter is drafted, we can all review it and share it.
What I had, Mr. Chair, for verbatim, just to kind of emphasize what Abby just said. You had one be a two-way with a narrow sidewalk, but that would require removing trees.
Yep.
Two, to keep the road, trees, and add a narrow footpath behind the trees, existing trees. And then the third was, doing the one-way with a multi-use, which would be the pilot. And retaining the important details of that rural road, even if it's a one-way. And keep the character, maybe add a split rail fence, and those are the materials that you all
Grass
discussed.
median,
Yeah, yeah, grass median.
I have grass median, Belgian law, limited signage and paint. As well as anything preserving the remote and rural fields.
would anyone like to move that?
Yeah.
So I make it,
I think-
that's my motion.
Okay,
Seconded.
thank you, Rita. George?
We're voting,
Yeah,
this is the vote, so I'll vote in favor, yes.
and on your motion, Abby,
Aye.
Clement?
Yeah, I think we're voting to write the letter.
Yes.
Yes, aye.
Tom?
No,
No. Okay.
I'm
and-
opposed to writing the letter with, including making it one way.
And I'm an I as well.
So,
So-
I,
sorry.
no,
Let's just note that on option 2, or whichever option it was, 3, with the one way that Tom's not in favor of.
But maybe say, I would say, when the letter is written, that was not a unanimous recommendation. That way, right, Tom, would that be sufficient?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Tom, but I was just trying to be polite and say, all right, try this, but
Well, first, I just want to clarify that. I mean, I know that Mike is, you're doing this as much as he can and to help us all. But I'm, I'm just an old Nantucketer. I just don't think it's going to work. So I'm on the board, and now you got to listen to me, and that's my decision.
I appreciate that, Tom. Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's time on this. Thank you, Mike, for joining, and Sam.
Thank you, Mike.
No, thank you all. I appreciate the discussion. This is extremely helpful. I appreciate y'all.
And you'll have a letter from us probably sometime next week.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
It looks like we have Lauren with us. Let's move on to the Massachusetts Stretch Energy Code and implications for historic structures. Good morning, Lauren. Thank you for
Good to see
joining
you.
us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to start a general conversation today about encouraging more efficient historic homes, however practicable, and providing some context, I think, for the stretch code article that was passed at annual town meeting this year. And to answer any questions, of course, but this is going to be more of a general conversation with the caveat, I am not a code expert, I am not a code official, but I did provide that reference document from Mass Save, which really summarizes the interpretation of the energy codes, which continue to evolve to comply with our Commonwealth's clean energy and climate goals of electrification, and how we can do our best as a community, knowing there are exemptions and quite a bit of latitude for our code officials with their discretionary approvals for permits. So I'm not sure what I'm looking at here, but I did want to review that technical code language from the Mass Save handout, but
Oh. You all can't see that? Hold on, sorry. I don't know where it went.
It was in our packet.
No, this is what I emailed. Do you see it now? Sorry, Lauren.
Hmm.
yes, that's it. And Holly, if you could scroll to the second page. And I think the most key language comes under definition and also application. But in a nutshell, at this annual town meeting, the town urged the community to not overturn an adoption for our local stretch energy code, which ensures more efficient home building for new construction, major renovations, and new additions. It's not for repairs or most renovation projects. And we ask the community to try to do our best with compliance, knowing that we pay a lot of money for liquid fuels, energy on Nantucket, it makes sense. But at the same time, if you look at this document, you will see that there really is a lot of reason for exemption and interpretation by our local code officials. So if any energy code requirements would result in damage to the historic character of the building, that highlighted language there does permit our local preservation authority to submit a report to the building official for an exemption. So all of this existed previously to the stretch code vote at town meeting. This is what will remain. So I'm not so sure that historic homes are threatened because of the stretch code going into operation, but I think what I'm interested to engage with the commission about is how we can work together to encourage more efficiency in historic homes. Knowing that there's new products on the market, such as double paned insulated windows that look historically appropriate. As an example, the town building on 16 Broad Street is actually installing these types of windows presently that maybe we can look at. And that, homeowners of historic homes do want more efficiency, want more comfort. And if there's a way that maybe HDC applications don't have to always present a design for single glazed windows for every window, maybe just the windows facing public ways, we can achieve more energy efficiency as a community. So I think that's kind of the general overview of where the town stands, what we're trying to do, and what the code is trying to lay forward, and where our exemption exists. And happy to answer any questions or engage in this conversation.
Thank you, Lauren. Commissioners, any questions, concerns?
I have a question.
Rita?
So how would the exemption process work? Would it be like, today someone goes in for historic determination? Would it be like following that same process, or?
That is the exact question which staff and our HERS raters on island are trying to navigate. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And we have a very understanding, I think, building department. We want to protect our historic assets here. That exact process needs to be better pinned down, but I think between Holly, myself, and Paul Murphy, we can come up with a good solution there. But we just have this language to look forward to, and it doesn't seem all that restrictive or difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that the stretch code can be utilized just as any other building code that somebody's trying to get exemptions from the building, substantial compliance section. It should all kind of fall into place. So don't reinvent the wheel, as Lauren said. We have the historic determination process that people do. And I generate a letter, goes to the building commissioner, there he has it. I think one of the things is just trying to make sure that the state is okay with that process, because then he obviously has a process he has to do with the state to make sure that there's exemptions, and just trying to make sure that it's clarified and not reinvent the wheel. It's pretty much right. I think Lauren is in the same boat. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We already have a clean process. Just like you all see structures before the HDC that are elevated. With our resilient Nantucket design guidelines, same process. People, if it's a historic structure, apply for the historic determination as well. And they're able to be, 4 feet high versus the 8 feet high, and follow that compliance. So it's really looking at the substantial compliance section and hopefully making sure that the state and obviously, the building department, we're all on the same page, we're not having to, let's do something new, so that's what I'm thinking.
So over the years, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but over the years, when I've had projects that involve historic houses and the windows are original, either from, you know, the 1800s or early 1900s. And we're, you know, we restore those, but we're like taking a house that is a seasonal house and making it year round. We're adding to it, so we're making it more efficient as far as insulation and so forth. But with the windows, to have a house full of single pane windows and to add one double glazed window, you know, would change the character. So in those situations, the building department has been amenable to having a like kind window to match all the other windows in the house. Lauren, and am I assuming that it's kind of the same system now, or would be?
The system is not changing, but again, it is our hope that knowing that there could be more appropriate insulated, more efficient windows on the market now that previously existed, that a more efficient option could be considered in the building design to try to comply with the new energy codes. We understand the reason for exemptions, but you know, does it still make sense to require a home, whether it's brand new infill construction or a large new addition, to install 100% single glazed windows?
I do think, and this is why you'll hear me stress the importance of a window survey. Window surveys are important in order to know whether or not this historic structure has had contemporary changes to their windows, whether they're originally historic and true divided light, and they just need to be, you know, restored appropriately. Because we know that there's old windows that are actually better than contemporary windows, or are these then changed out, they say in the 1950s, and it's really bad construction, and they have, you know, these triple tracks on it as well, and you can't even see the profile, the historic profile of the window. That's where I think we're looking at the technology changing, of windows, of SDLs, and the profiles being able to be retained. That's gonna be important. And I have an example of one that just recently went to the HGC. Historic structure in the old historic district, 1880s, so like almost like a Victorian era. All the windows were replaced at one point. So there's no historic structure, historic windows within this structure. The applicant wanted to go to SDL. Well, as much as, you know, it's really, you don't want to dictate the exact manufacturer, we on Nantucket know that there's only a couple manufacturers that have the true Nantucket profile of those windows. And because the technology is changing, those organizations, those companies are doing SDLs.
What is
Simulated divided light.
Simulated divided light, basically double pane versus the single pane. So here's a prime example of a historic structure in the OHG that actually does not have its original windows. They've already been replaced and they're poor from an energy perspective. So why not allow them to change to a manufacturer that has them as the double paned windows for energy protection, but at the same time retain the character defining features of the Nantucket profile. And this is, I think, a good change, a direction shift. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to be across the board. I think it's going to be on a case by case basis. The condition of the windows, the window surveys are playing into play. But no, I was, you know, I think this is a good turn with the technology as Lauren had mentioned. It's cheap.
The problem I remember years ago.
You know, would be house by house.
Exactly.
Right, it would really truly happen, and again, that's why you'll hear me. If you haven't already, where's your window survey? Give us the details of these windows, looking down with the jambs and the casings, and you know, are those, was this are these original to the house, or were they something? Yeah, because you know, in time, some of these contemporary changes that have maybe mid-century are just not energy efficient, nor are they appropriate for the character of that house. So all of that, I think, is
case by case and really have to play into it. But I think it's a good thing from the energy perspective.
And we'll
I-
have to see how these windows mature and age, because they're windows that were put in that were like kind, 25 years ago that are already rotted
Right.
compared to the 150-year-old windows that are still going strong.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of embodied energy and efficiency in using something that's already there, even if air is getting through. But also I have experience with, tilt takeouts that are insulated windows, not aesthetically, pleasing or historic looking, that have wind blowing through them anyway. So, it's a balance, and, I feel like the older windows, whenever they can be used, are probably gonna be the most efficient thing. But certainly in new construction, it's something to think about. There is a different character, even the very best insulated windows with nice profiles. There is a different look to it between that and a traditional old true divided light. So location, proximity, the town building is a part of the reason for going with the insulated window is that the building is from 1965 or four. So it's not like, this town building that was built in the 1800s or something. So, but I think we have to be careful about where we implement it and on what structures. George, you look at it.
The thing I remember from years ago with, which is they approved these snap-in muntins.
Yeah.
And then as soon as someone goes to wash the windows, they just take them out and throw them away. And that happened to the house next door to me, that all of a sudden it was 1/1 pane when it was supposed to be 6/6 or 12/12. They just annoy people and they get rid of them after they've been approved by the HDC as looking
No
like,
snap-ins, no snap-in grills, those are no.
those are good, they're gone.
Well,
Good.
so my question is, will you make recommendations, use this type of window and it will be approved, or?
Well, no, I mean, I think all of it is a case by case basis. I do think the review process that Lauren mentioned with the town building was, and even the HTC in their motion said that this is a pilot, see how this works. I supported it.
It's a big pilot.
It's a big one, but if you really, I mean, to Angus's point about it not being the original Rick revival that was there from Mr. Sanford, I do think that needs to come into, into the conversation about having energy efficient windows in a structure that's mid-century. Yes, it's contributing to the local and national district, but it was trying to stress on the commission of looking at it from what's its use created for an office building.
Point of order,
Not always.
point of order,
Tom?
point of order.
Yes?
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, is everybody else getting,
I don't know where that feedback's coming from, not here.
I can hardly hear this conversation. I'm getting some wicked feedback.
I think that was probably from Lauren.
Lauren,
Office building. So,
she's not in an efficient building, as it's clear.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess to the point is it was a great example to look at it, because
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the whole backlog at HDC, you're adding another, they're gonna have to look at the windows and look at the.
already do.
Yeah.
It's already baked into the process. So really and truly, I think this commission should take out of it is the energy, the stretch code and our green communities designation that Lauren worked so hard on is important. And it does take into consideration based on this information of our historic
district and our historic character, and we're wanting to make sure that we can, you know, continue that exemption process as we've already established for the historic district, for people to be in compliance.
So the window assessment is already in place?
Yes, the
or-
window survey, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah,
I
that's,
don't see any of that.
that's for, and you know, you gotta also remember, our period of significance goes up to 1975.
Mhm.
So technically, any type of, and we also know that a structure that was built in mid-century, has different windows than a structure that was built in the 1850s, you know, that type of thing. So it all depends on case by case basis, what type of window, where it's located, type of structure, so all that comes in kind of points. But this would allow kind of the continued process and procedures that have already been in place, just because it's a new code with the state and that the town's adopted shouldn't preclude historic structure to continue.
Just to be crystal clear, the base building code and the stretch code do not apply to basic repairs or most renovations. It's really for 100 square feet, new additions, new construction. So I think there's just increased interest for more efficient windows for all residents and building applications for the obvious reasons. But this will really only come out when it comes to those new gut rehabs, large additions, new construction. But it is our hope, because right now inefficient single glazed windows are being approved for entire buildings without any consideration of the energy code, because they can, there is this exemption, but we are hoping that the HTC and the design teams can work to approve more insulated glass windows where they can on the building. So where they cannot be seen, would be a best case scenario. But where it is contrary to HTC and our historic landmark status, we understand that single panes or historic windows may be more appropriate, but we think there's an opportunity to increase energy efficiency in a sensitive way to the historic structures or the old historic districts where there's infill construction, new construction projects. And that's where I think I would be seeking the committee's support. That would be the best case scenario, that, you know, new applications don't just automatically design and go for HTC approval of single glazed windows automatically, that there is more thought behind trying to comply with more efficient energy codes.
And to Lauren's point, I've seen it, Lauren, I've seen new construction, it's not all across the board, but I've seen new construction with the OHD being, requesting for SDL, so that's.
So there used to be policy that in the OHD, in town in Wisconsin, that you couldn't have insulated windows. Yet they are getting approved, and as Lauren had mentioned, that sometimes it's just on the front or the street visible sides, and then everything else is insulated. So Lauren, just so that we're as helpful as we can be, what would you be looking for from us? A statement about the use of insulated windows in general, as involving the different circumstances of whether, you know, it's front and center on Main Street, or whether, you know, it's out in the sticks somewhere and not visible. What would be most helpful for your cause?
You know, I think staff and our local HERS raters are trying to come up with a solution that makes sense. And Holly, maybe we can come back with Andy Bacino with some proposed language about, you know, what protocol we think makes sense for the island that involves this exemption process, or just general guidance or goal setting for these new construction projects, or to encourage energy efficient historic homes however we can. And maybe we look to that next meeting with a more clear statement and guidance from the committee.
May I ask another question, Mr. Chairman? A lot of the code that I skimmed through it, I can't read it because I have no idea what I'm reading. But it was talking about solar panels. Are you going to address that in any fashion?
Solar panels are not required by any building code or the stretch code, so. I think it's a town goal to encourage it wherever we can, wherever the HDC approves it, but it's not relevant to any existing code.
They do talk about it.
So this would be exclusively about windows? No.
Well, it could be,
I would say just energy compliance together, am I correct? And, Lauren?
It is trying to comply with the stretch code, which only requires increased insulation, more efficient appliances, heating, cooling systems, and windows. Solar is not currently part of that equation. The state is not banning fossil fuels. They are not requiring solar. So as part of any energy code. So I don't see a reason to bring that up at this point. It's all about code compliance.
But it does potentially go beyond windows, looking at things like insulation and what you can, you know, do in a historic home.
Well, I mean,
Potential.
again, that's the thing, that's why having a clear process of exemptions
Yeah.
will allow. I mean, there are people that want to retain their historic structure, have STL windows, but still retain all the other character defining features and including, they can be exempt from other aspects like insulation.
Mhm.
The only visible changes of the stretch code is in promoting heat pumps. So that could be geothermal or air source heat pumps, which do require condensers outside, which may need the screening, we understand, and windows. So those are the two that directly apply to, I think, the HDC or the historic review. So it's windows and possibly condensing units.
And I guess on to another point that this commission usually looks at are the historic tax credits. You know, you may see a historic structure come before you for a historic tax credit that may, you know, depending on, I know there's push for flexibility with the Secretary of Interior standard right now. So that might be something that we see, you know, they may want to be, you know, submit their application through the process, and when it comes to you all, we may see that in one of their things, that they're being exempt from certain.
And I just, like, my concern, I'm thinking sort of like of a specific case, but with, you know, like open stud, you know, summer cottages out in like Welwyn or Nantucket or wherever it's at the island, like, we want to make sure that they're not being required to add a ton of insulation that's really changing the character of that building. So like that the exemption process would be, you know, not only windows, but, you know,
Yes,
things like
so
of that nature
basically
as well.
any building code.
Yeah.
Really and truly, because it triggers the substantial compliance section, that's when that comes in.
Mhm.
So as long as somebody gets that historic determination, they're good.
Great.
And that's per even, you know, the state acknowledged it.
Yeah.
We'll continue that. Cause yeah, it's a good point.
So does it make sense for us to wait till we have language from Lauren to review and then, you know, write up an opinion, regarding that after we get that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Rather than trying to fabricate something between us now?
Yeah.
agreed.
Does that seem good, Lauren?
It absolutely does. And the only other thing would be for us maybe to look at the 16 broad windows and to get opinion about those. We have, we're very hopeful that those can serve as a good model for the community going forward. They're Green Mountain windows, double pane insulated. So, and we think they look good. Hopefully they perform well as well, but your input on those aesthetics are welcome.
This is probably a success for me to ask, where are they put on there? I haven't inspected closely.
I guess everywhere.
Is it throughout the whole?
Throughout the whole, the
Okay.
previously existing windows, which were Brosco, I think installed in the 80s, I want to say, were rotting. They could not be restored. And it was an opportunity the town saw to lead by example, promote energy efficiency and comfort for employees. As someone who used to work in that building right next to a window, it is quite an uncomfortable, drafty building. So we're trying to maximize efficiency and comfort for building occupants however we can. So we're hopeful this will be a good test pilot.
Yeah, I assisted on the window survey. But it was a windy day, so I got to see some of my colleagues in their offices. And of course,
Their hair blowing back from the
Well,
wind.
but feel the
Yeah,
wind,
the ineffective
especially
window.
those corner offices when you have windows on both sides. And yeah, and so I was very supportive of this.
Well, also it's interesting because you can see all of the windows. It's a building in the round, so
Yeah.
they would all have to be the same.
And next
You
time
could
you go down and see what
decide.
they've done, I think, look to, this is a, masonry facade. You also have channeled, sills that are made out of granite. You couldn't see those before with the triple tracks.
Oh.
Now you can see them. So that's another thing to think about.
So maybe between now and the next meeting, everyone can pay
Yeah.
special attention and we can give an opinion.
That's a good idea.
That's promoting or not the changes.
And also maybe to have a look at, is it 32 York, the house you're referencing? I don't, well, I guess I don't know when, if they've
Yeah,
done, they probably haven't done the work yet. Okay.
So, not yet, but when they do, I mean, I think that's gonna be a great example to look at.
You said 32 York.
You know what we should do, actually, you brought up the point is maybe if we do look at these, if we talked about, building in Nantucket in mind, so this, like, maybe we can get some nice pictures and things of this, so then we have good examples that we have actual, like, visuals of them, so if we put them on a website or whatever, so then they're memorialized.
That does sort of fit in with the environmentally conscious idea of looking at the solar panels, where it works, where it doesn't, and yeah, it could be the windows where it seems like it's working.
Yeah, we could just kind of start making a little bit of like an index or some sort of, so we have these good examples, so that we can tell someone like, hey, go to 16 Broad, look at those windows, or just like wherever, but as we know things are coming up, we should ensure we document them, and then we have, good, clear pictures and things like that, so that we can have visuals to send people.
I would recommend to continue this discussion to next month.
Absolutely.
Great.
Let's move on to ongoing survey work.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Lauren.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank
Speak
you,
soon.
Lauren. So, we're still looking for commissioner comments on the batch 5.
Yes.
I confess I was leaving it, and then finally I had the time to look at it and it wasn't, I wasn't able to access what I thought I had downloaded. Did you hear anything
I
back
did
from Powell?
not.
No.
Yeah, Ginny said she was gonna send one to me. She hasn't done that yet. I've been checking all morning, so. Do not, I have them available digitally, like on my computer at work. So, if somebody, I can put them on a jump drive and you all can come. Unfortunately, I have no way of creating my Dropbox that I have is full, even when I was deleting stuff, it just wasn't big enough. I think that's why they did a link. She said she was gonna refresh, she didn't have a chance to, so I'll touch base with her again in the meantime, but I mean, that's the only other option I think of is put it on the jump drive. And she provides us a PDF version and a Word version. I was gonna send one or the other, not, and I'm even trying to do that in the Dropbox. So, but I really want you all to look at this. This batch was specifically for that last group of fish lot ones where they needed more research. So keep that in mind when you're looking at them. We want to make sure that we catch anything that needs to be refined, or I think before we had some minor word choices, I guess. I think they've gotten up to speed on that. I welcome as many comments as possible. I did tell Ginny that we want to be able to get them to them, so hopefully I'll hear something later in the week
Okay,
on
we'll be
that.
looking.
I got.
Okay, well, because I did send you all the link, and unfortunately the link expired, what, Monday? It was
Yeah, Friday.
Friday. So I had,
can zip them, I can send.
Do you have access to be able to use it?
Yeah, I have both. I just was looking at my computer. I see, I was bad. I downloaded them, but did
You
not
have
look
them,
at
but
them,
didn't
but I
look.
have them. But
Yeah.
they have I have the PDF and I have the Word document.
I don't have the capability of doing a drop box that's big enough to handle them all, is my goal.
If you
But
can send
Abby,
out a
you can
PDF,
send-
I would take that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
I can do it.
figure out.
Otherwise, I'll go with a memory stick to you, Holly. and
Yeah.
plug-
No, but I should be able to compress the folder of the PDFs.
Sounds great.
So I'll try it. Sorry.
Let me know.
But I'll send it to everybody.
It's not there
Okay,
yet.
thank you.
No, it's not good. But I failed where I was like, yeah, I need to do these, so I downloaded it in time, I just did not do it. So I'm sorry.
No,
Right?
I did download them at least.
So I would say, would love to be able to get comments sooner rather than later, but obviously as soon as we get them, to everybody, then I think that would be good. Provide comments as you have, whatever easy way, but email would be preferable for me. If you can email them to me, that would be great. I can compile them all.
All right, so Preservation Month webinar with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and National Alliance of Preservation Commissions.
Yes, so the NAPC and the ACHP, which you just outlined who they are, have a joint free webinar, which I emailed to everybody in CLG, which I think is going to be really something special. May 23rd.
Yeah,
And I say that because the new chair, and she's been there for what, maybe over a year now, Sarah Bronin. She, in my opinion, is a fresh breath air within the advisory council, leadership. And is really looking at all facets of preservation. She's on LinkedIn, so if you're on LinkedIn, I highly recommend following her. She also is very providing herself as a source for students within the preservation schoolings in college and undergrad and graduate to be available to answer any questions. The advisory council is very, very important, I think, for preservation in this country. So this webinar is really gonna really outline some of the great things that they're doing. And one of the things you probably have heard is the push to look at the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and how they could help, look at them and see if there's things that can be changed to assist, whether it's affordable housing, climate issues, all these different initiatives that have really kind of been brought up within the last, few years. I think affordable housing has been for a long time here, but nonetheless, so you can really see the intersection between preservation and all these other issues. So highly recommend taking a look at the webinar on the 23rd, and NAPC is always really good. If you've ever done one of theirs and you don't attend, they'll send you an email with the information, their
Okay.
packet.
Well, I can't do the
Yeah,
23rd.
so just register for it.
Okay.
They'll get you on their list. And then you'll be
Yeah.
able to get information afterwards. And
Okay.
because it's a joint partnership between them, I would assume you'll also get information more from ACHP. So,
Yeah, because sometimes you can watch if you, good.
yes. What is it? Her name? Oh, Sarah Bronin. She's done a lot of preservation work in Connecticut before she took this role with ACHP.
So, we need to elect a new representative for the offshore wind farm,
Yes.
section 106 review. Would anyone like to sign up for that? Don't all jump at once.
I volunteer only
What a
because
trooper.
of my previous ESG work, so. And like I told you, if you're not in support, Tom, you'll appreciate it. If you do not support the wind farms, I do know who we can lobby in Congress to take the appropriations. So I'll do it.
Good.
His name is Rep. Garbarino. He's staunch anti-wind farms.
And we would want to back that?
Well,
Why would we come out against wind farms? The way I look at it, it is a desperate measure. I don't like looking at them, but the planet is dying. I mean, what choices do we have?
Either
I
way.
agree with George.
Yeah, I think this representative personally could be for or against. It's about participating and making us aware of what is going on with the negotiations and, well, Tom, you could probably tell us better what's involved with it. Tom, are you still there?
Oh,
I mean, I see both sides. I mean, I used to work in ESG sustainability. So my company is very pro wind farms. But I also understand people who in the community are anti-wind farms.
because they don't like to look at them? Or are they pretending they're Santa
There are
and whales?
people who are
The impact
supportive
on
of
the
the whales,
environment.
there are people.
Yeah, but the
who
people,
don't like the
those people who
process.
are coming out on the whales, they don't care about anything else to say to the whales. And they're underwritten by the fossil fuel companies. They're not worried about lobstering. They're not boycotting lobster. They aren't worried about the lobster lines. They're not worried about the speed of ships. The only thing they're worried about to save the whales is getting rid of the wind farms. So
I hear you, but I mean, I'm just saying, I see all the sides. I think to Angus's point is, we just wanna be, I guess the way I look at this or anything, whether or not you support it or don't, it's better to be part of the process and at least know what's going on than to not.
So yeah, so basically, if I may, Mr. Chair, thank you, Abby, for volunteering. You would be representing this commission under section 106 and 110F of the National Historic Preservation Act. That's how we are a consulting party. So I represent the NPDC, Diane Coombs represents the HTC. And with that, our purview is not the whales, it's not the fishery, it's not this, it's not that. It is specifically our cultural historic resources under National Historic Preservation Act because we're a National Historic Landmark. That's where 110F comes into play. So regardless on what side of the coin on, it's about assessing an adverse effect, which we know the adverse effect is going to be. We're going to see it. We don't know what the effects are going to be financially to this island. And then there's a cumulative effect that we don't know because we only have one that's being built right now. There's others in the pipeline. I will say on that point, because their other developments are at different stages of and a lot of things have been pushed aside. The federal government has been pushing this regulatory review for NEPA and HPA. All the acronyms are crazy. But one of the things I think that's good for the commission to know as well, Gabby, is one thing that we need to really be cognizant of is the cumulative effects. So even our nonprofits that are in the cultural resource world, like NPT, MMA, they're also consulting parties. The cumulative effects for a national historic landmark is very, very important. So that's what you don't know what's going to be, regardless on what side of the coin you were on. And with that, yeah. And if there's any questions on what that all means, let me know.
Well, any other volunteers? 'Cause,
No,
It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it's a conflict of interest for me potentially because of MPT also being a consulting party, so I'd say go ahead, Abby.
I know I'm fighting off people to do this.
So, all in favor of Abby representing us for the 106 reviews of the wind farm?
I,
George?
Aye.
Rita? Tom? Okay, I'm an aye as well. Thank you, Abby. Appreciate that.
I'll let you guys know how it goes. This one will probably be fun, the first meeting, just because it's town meeting.
And on that note, I can tell you, as of this week, we received correspondence from BOEM. You know, the federal government, that branch that was created specifically for this industry, the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management. They're suspending, well, the developer for Beacon Wind is suspending their review for a while, probably about 6 months.
Mhm.
So they'll let us know when they're coming back to initiate section 106 review. But I thought that was interesting.
they came and spoke at the Athenaeum and had a whole presentation. Must be, I hate to say 6 to 7 years ago now, pre-pandemic.
But you might be thinking about, Vineyard Wind before they even started.
Might be,
Yeah, probably, I think they did. do
but
that.
they threw around a lot from Bowen. What was had been approved and what was,
Yeah, right now, there's, with us, at least as a consulting party, it's only Vineyard Wind.
All right. Just have two more things on our agenda. Holly, can you pull up the goal sheet?
We're doing well on our goals this month. There was a lot of green. And, so, I think we already talked about, we still need to review batch 5. I'm gonna send you guys the folder. Funding program, I know Rita, we had, that you were working on outreach. I think it's still ongoing to preservation map for the community. The grant, the CPC grants were approved on day 1. So that was a complete yay, they got approved at
And,
day 1 of a town meeting.
yes, and, yeah, no kidding. And on that note, PIN, Preservation Institute in Nantucket will be here. I think they start next week, hopefully-ish.
Oh, really?
No?
No, Cleary gets here next week,
Okay.
but the students don't come till
Later,
later.
yeah.
Later. in June.
But Clary's here, and her and we've communicated about that, she wanted to know how it went. And of course, we'll be starting off that work with her, so. there's a-
And that includes the surveying, the digital surveying.
Yes, but basically what we're gonna be focusing on, I believe, first is going to be the, what's it called, West Monomoy, New Guinea.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
survey plan.
That survey.
Yes, and I think it was pretty interesting. I didn't realize with 32, back to 32 York Street, that was the site of the Methodist Church. Or, well, I guess maybe EME Church, right?
Yes.
Yes, Episcopal Methodist. I didn't know where it was. I knew it was within the New Guinea area, but it was where that house is now.
Ah.
So cool. That's what I'm doing.
Wow.
So, great news. Sounds like we're gonna be making moves the next couple months, especially when the students get here, so that's moving onward. With the sewer force main, David Gray had reached out to you, I know you've been finding cisterns.
Yes, and I actually went out in the field with him a couple weeks ago. He showed me before they did the Lily Street paving, and of course that has to be done for summer, it's not, they're gonna be putting the historic material back and all that. They were at the spot where that tree is, the intersection of Lily and Liberty. But he also took me down to Vestal Street. And if you all have been down to Mariah Mitchell and seen Vestal Street, before the work that they did down there, which has nothing to do with sewer force main, but has to do with sewer issues. There was stacks of concrete or asphalt over the years on that street. So as you can imagine, every time they paved, it was just adding. It was causing runoff issues into these historic structures. So, David wanted to get my opinion on the curbing. Obviously, we have Mariah Mitchell with very historic curbing, very historic, which is not Brandon. And very historic, cat 2 picket. If you take a look at their cat 2 picket fence that they have there, it's not to the profile we have in building with Nantucket in mind, but it's actually the historic profile with the wrapping to it, which I thought was pretty interesting.
At the Mariah Mitchell birthplace.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So my point is David is very, keen on making sure that historic,
Yeah.
input is there, and he's asking me my opinions on things, where something needs to go to beach to see. So, good stuff.
Great.
It's good that he's.
Oh, very much so.
Next thing, just as a reminder, the NEH cultural and community resilience grants are due next week, April 1st. Section 106 reviews, I just have, those were the last ones we did. We had a lot of excitement because we had the grant point and the milestone pulled this one at the same time. So those were complete last month. If obviously as anything comes up, we'll add it. I think we're working on scheduling the annual meeting for the CLG. Same thing with tax credits, the last one we had was the 89 Easton. I think we're still working on what we talked about with the solar video, and as Angus, you had mentioned, us thinking of a couple places where we have good examples that we would want to include. And I believe, Holly, that involves us talking with
Florence.
Florence,
Yeah.
and then continuing education, just for everyone who's aware, in the next couple weeks, there's the training, the CLG training on National Register of Opinions. I think if there's two options, so it's on the 4th or the 6th. I believe one's during the day and one's in the evening, so hopefully you can make one of them. If not,
I think the 4th is during the day and the 6th is at night.
right. And then, just the reminder, these other ones are ongoing. The MHC had announced a new maritime education grant that's matching an existing NPS program. So if, that's something Egan Maritime is gonna get involved with, I think we just wanna be supportive of, the historic angle, for sure. And then, we had talked about, and I think we still need to continue to figure out what we wanna do with like a historic structure resiliency conservation workshop.
Yeah, that's something
We have it by the end of the year, so we
reach out to NHA on, if they're still working on that.
and then the other thing is just ongoing collaboration. So that's pretty much everything that's going on, not a lot of major stuff, just probably the most important thing is, we do the training, you do the CLG training
Yes.
by next time.
Yes.
So if you haven't signed up, sign up. If you want the link, let us
I think
know.
I did, but I can't. find it.
That's this one right here.
Yeah.
That's what came directly from MHC.
But
What she said was at least staff and a representative of the commission
Oh, that's right.
do it, but she also said it would be highly, I highly encourage everybody to take it. So if she says that, then I say that to them.
I know, at least I've signed up, you've signed up, but others, I think
I think I
you
signed
signed up as well.
I can't remember whether I did or didn't. I was gonna.
But if you didn't, we're happy to share the link. And, oh, and the other important thing is, once I send out the link, do the batch file.
Yes.
please.
So that's part of the goal.
Okay.
So that's it.
I wanted to go back to, if it's okay, the solar video.
Yeah.
Do we create a work group or something like that for that?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think it was me and Abby and Angus.
Yeah.
What I was thinking of doing is reaching out to Florencia. And just seeing, when she could assist working on that and what that looks like.
That sounds like a plan.
And I'll let you.
I think that was the plan.
Okay, was it?
Yeah.
Sorry. I think town
That's
meeting
still the
got in the
plan.
way.
That's
No,
still
we
good.
certainly had a lot of things going.
Yeah, so I will do that.
The last thing before we take off is approving the minutes.
Yes.
Would anyone like to?
I did read them and approve. I'd like a motion to approve them.
Thank you, Clement. Do I have a-
Seconded.
Thanks, Tom, on your motion, Clement.
I,
George,
Yes, I approve.
so Rita.
Aye.
Yeah.
Yes, and Abby,
Aye.
I as well. Thank you for those.
okay, it's 12 o'clock.
Would anyone like to make a motion
To
to
adjourn.
adjourn?
Motion,
I move we adjourn.
second,
On your motion, Tom,
Aye.
Clement,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Rita,
Aye.
Abby,
Aye.
I as well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Abby, could you send me that link